Hi everyone, welcome to part 3 of Behind the Curtain, Exposing the Concealed Light of Tznius. Now in part 1, we talked about that prerequisites and the purpose of a woman, and we began to lay the foundation of the importance of why a woman needs to be tznius, not why she wants to be tznius. And we talked about the fact that in the woman being concealed, she is the pipeline and the vessel to hold the bracha. And without that tznius being in place, that it becomes like a leaky vessel. And when this happens, has v'shalom, all of the protections that come along with the presence of Hashem being with us is, again, has v'shalom, gone. And it becomes, we become an open target for all our enemies, just as it's laid out in the Torah. In the second part, we talked about these behaviors, and we kind of went into things about behaviors in the workplace and things that we see in our day-to-day life, whether you're going to the store, whether you're going to work, with your, friends. These are things that we see. Sometimes we see these little behaviors. Sometimes they're unintentional, and sometimes they are intentional, depending, on the woman who's displaying them. So now we're going to talk about something that, really causes a lot of people anxiety. And that is, okay, you've got it. You understood it. You want to grow in tznius. Now what do I wear? And so I find that there are 3 terms you really need to know, and they're really important based upon where you're living. But within where you're living, there is still the guidelines. There are the rules, they're fences about where your limits are. And if you know what those limits are, it's easier to shop within those limits. But before we start out, I'm going to read 2 intros, one from the Hassan Sofer and one from the Chofetz Chaim, on this topic of the lack of modesty. And the Hassan Sofer writes that this last exile has been more severe than the early exiles, and not a single day passes without a new curse which surpasses the last one, is due to the fact that in all other exiles there was no immodesty among women, while now this is not the case. Now, because of our many sins, immodesty has become common among women. This is far worse than all the other sins in the Torah. And the Chofetz Chaim wrote in one of his letters in 5684, the reason for this matter, and he has in parentheses that there are troubles and destruction and punishments, and that there is a decline in the generations, is that we have ourselves distanced ourselves from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we distance him from us, and because of this awful thing called quote-unquote fashion, we have with our own hands canceled God's own words, and your camp shall be holy, and God will not see a shameful thing among you. For the power of impurity greatly overwhelms with immodesty. From this results all evil and trouble, and so it is written in our holy books. And I want to say as early as 30 years ago, the Moran Hagayon Harav Elazar Menachem Manshach Shlita, at a gathering, based upon strengthening modesty in Yerushalayim, said, and he was quoted as saying the following, that if the wives of our Torah scholars in the kollel wear such clothing, we will have to close all of our kollels. For if their wives wear indecent clothing, what worth is there to it their husband's Torah? Does not all their Torah learning go to the Sitra Akra, the forces of impurity? Evil and hard decrees will descend upon the world, as our sages brought by Rashi and Parshas Noach have said. Wherever immodesty and promiscuity are to be found, chaos and pandemonium will come to the entire world, killing both evil and good people. Has v'shalom, awful and terrible. Hashem protect us. And this was told over by Rabbi Yehuda Adis. So you figure this was probably being mentioned around 1980, and from that time to this, there is surely a decline. And what he said, unfortunately, we do see this correlation. We do see this depravity that's come upon the earth. And you have to, at some point, if you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, you have to start with your own situation. But you have to look in this area. If there are, has v'shalom, harsh and negative decrees, let's just start with your own situation that you find you're really having a hard time, then you have to improve in this area. And you can't, just start out and say, well, I did everything and nothing happened. It wasn't, this is something that you have to put into practice. You have to make this a way of your life. And not only that, when now you extend further, if there's been harsh decrees and you see this continually happening, times one family, Hasbe Shalom, in a Jewish community, times two, times three, then the whole community really does have to take a step back and look at what's going on with the modesty. Because remember, the modesty is that vessel. And so even if you're sending your husbands and your sons out to the kollels and they're studying, that it's like a leaky vessel. It's just going down. And like it's been quoted by the Rebbeinu here, it's going over to the other side, Has v'shalom. So now we're going to get into the three terms, Dat Moshe, Dat Yehudi, and Minhag HaMakom. And the Dat Moshe is basically the Oraita. It's the bare minimum of what you have to do. And the Dat Yehudi is more the Rabbanan. And the Minhag HaMakom is really what's going on in your neck of the woods. So for instance, if you're in, first of all, if you're where I am, I think I've been given an opportunity to probably set a trend here, because I can come out with, I think, anything. I don't think there's like really no trend here except for that it's the Hutzla arts of Hutzla arts. But if you're in the 5 towns, if you're one of those, and then you notice that there's like a look of modesty. There's and Muncie has a look of modesty. Like everybody has their look, their quote unquote look. I happen to like, I'll be quiet and say I love it how the girls do it up in Williamsburg, because they're always they're Tznius, but they're always dressed nice, right? Like they're ready to greet Mashiach. So now this is how we should always be. You always want to make a Kiddush Hashem. You don't want to make a Hilul Hashem. And it's possible to do that. And you can do it. You can make modesty your own, provided that you're within the guidelines. So we're going to get into some of the things that the Gemara has stated about what those guidelines are. And we're not going to go through all of them just for time reasons. But anybody who wants to go, you can go in through the Gemara and you can find. And it says exactly, it really goes in. It's very technical about what has to be covered, what is permissible to be revealed. It gives out what is considered nakedness. And believe it or not, I've always heard people complaining about, why can't I listen to a woman singing? Believe it or not, that's considered erva. It's considered nakedness. So it's very, I think when we get to know what these things are, what the guidelines are, we can have an understanding. But for now, we're going to start focusing on the basics of, especially for those who are just, very scared about Tznius. And, if they're, if they're really having a hard time, and, modesty per se, I think, when I started going in, and I was becoming aware, I didn't think that I was so immodest before. My skirts were, first of all, I was always known for wearing a skirt. So, switching from pants to a skirt was not a problem for me. But, I found that my skirts were like right at the knee or right below the knee because I'm like petite, or just right above the knee. So they, for sure, I guess in today's standard, that would be considered like a long skirt, because most of the skirts are like mid-thigh, or even worse, and now this new trend is becoming where shirts, these shirt dresses, where mamash, it looks like you forgot your pants. It literally looks that way. But when I became aware of what the guidelines were, I used to go into the mall, and it would really be like, yeah, it was that dramatic. It really was. I would look in the windows and I would say, wow, if only you were a few more inches longer, right? All right. So I know many of you probably feel that same way, but fear not. You can make modesty your own. And to be quite honest, again, once you have practiced this for a while, once you have really understood, and your eyes all of a sudden will start to focus, and Hashem helps. He will help, and He will get you right to where you need to be, and He will really put your eyes on things that are tzniut and falling in line. So we're going to get into it. So I believe in the previous lesson we talked about in the Gemara in Nedarim about when a man gazes at the heel of a woman, and again the Gemara was using clean language here to kind of describe looking at the thigh, that their children would not be appropriate, and this would come out in the behavior, and of course we see that today. So speaking of the thigh, and again I'm going to try as much as possible to use really layman's terms, because I know this is going out to a lot of people who perhaps are not so well versed, and I want to give you a foundation to be as successful as you can be. But I encourage you to go out and get a rabbanit to really, really teach you the subject. And if you don't have a rabbanit, get a rabbanit. Today's day and age, not an excuse. My rabbanit is an hour away. My rav is an hour away. So I still have one. So you can, like Parkey always says, make for yourself a rabbi. Find yourself a rabbi or a rabbinite that can teach you this area. So talking about the pants, and in Masechet Brachot it talks about the shuk, and the shuk is from your hip to your knee area, so that's considered the thigh. So up to the, and I'm going to use nice language too, the rounded, up to the upper rounded part of the thigh, that's all considered nakedness, which is why pants is problematic. Not only because, first of all, like shorts and things like that are problematic, but also that you cannot reveal the shape of it. So this is where pants become problematic, and they do tend to show the shape. Now, ironically enough, not only, and again, all in the Gemara, not only can you not show the shape, but again, the lady parts, which sometimes, unfortunately, they've even made a song about this, and I believe it was called like camel toe and things of this nature. And before it was a great embarrassment if you were caught with something like that. And now they, again, in this upside down world, this is almost praiseworthy for a woman to go out this way. So you have to guard that. And believe it or not, in old days, they used to have what was called a sinah, which there's different opinions on what that was. A lot of people, I think, probably as far back as our maybe our great-great-grandmothers, they probably wore things like bloomers that kind of, really puffed out. Some people say it could have been an apron, but there was this great care to make sure that area was truly concealed, that it was not something that really could draw attention to. And I believe the word for this is habuk, which really means that it's really clinging onto the body. So these skin tight skirts, even these pencil skirts that even though a lot of them come below the knee, because of the fact that they are so, so close to the body that it's no good. However, an alternative to that, they have these things called column skirts. So if you're going, and I'm strictly talking like our mall gals, if you want to go in for a small skirt, which is not a pencil skirt, it is, it's somewhere between, it's not quite an A line. It's not quite an A line, but it's not hugging on the body from any area. And it does give this, it's a column, and it literally does give a nicer appearance without being clingy, and it's not quite in the same realm of a pencil skirt. So it gives a lot of ladies wear this, and they fall, and it falls right within tzniut, and it's a great way to look refined, have a nice refined look, especially if you're working in the office. But it does, and it falls in line with tznius. So now shirts. So shirts from the top part. Okay, so we're gonna go a little bit up. And I used to love these things called ballet neck and boat neck. And, of course, should I play the violins again? Should I do it? I know, girls, it hurt me too. It really did. So unless you're wearing a shell underneath, to kind of cover up that little, there's a space. Everyone knows what this space is, and we're going to talk about it. So anything from, the base of your neck, right where that point where, it's almost like the trapezius muscle, which is that shoulder, right above the shoulder, that part that looks, where bodybuilders, where they lift things up and they put them down, that big part right there, that is considered nakedness. The neck is not considered naked. That's not considered nakedness. But from that point to all the way down, that needs to be concealed. Additionally, from the elbow to right below where the arm is, that also has to be concealed. Now, unlike the pants, where that the shape of the arm can be, you can go and you can have a shirt that kind of shows more the shape of the arm, but it can't be painted on. So in our layman terms, those long sleeve crew necks or the long sleeve 3/4 sleeves is kind of where you want to find yourself. But again, it can't be painted on, and you can achieve this. It can be done. But again, I feel your sorrow. I get it, girls. Trust me, I do. So keeping in mind with the shirt, you want to make sure there's a bone, the first bone. If you tilt your head forward, and I'm doing it with all of you, you tilt your head forward and there's a bone that kind of starts popping out. From that point down, that all has to be covered. So none of this backless, you have to really be careful. Now, if you do find a shirt that you see, you really like the shirt and you want to make it work, this is where shells come in, and but you have to make sure that the shell is kind of protecting that neck area. You want to get it as, close all around. The best way to kind of measure this is the famous necklace test, where you put the necklace in, and where that necklace naturally falls, from that point on needs to be covered. So while your shirt, you can have these crew neck, long sleeve or 3/4 sleeve. So now if you were in a different place, let's say that it's a more froom area, this is where minhag hamakom would come in, and perhaps a blouse would be a better choice. So you always got to know where you're going. If it's permissible in your town and it falls within the line of Tznius, it's kosher. But if you're going into another place and you don't want everyone looking at you, this is what you need to do. So remember, the elbow, and you have to be careful even with 3/4 sleeves, because sometimes 3/4, for whatever reason, measurements seem to be different for every designer. The best way to test is if your elbow, when you flex your arm, if that's exposing, no good. Even, just to be machmir, and this is me, when I say 3/4, I'm talking about like mid arm, like maybe 3 inches from where your watch would naturally fall, just to be on the safe side. You want to make sure there is a good covering when you're flexing your arm at any time, whether it's, down, up, whatever. So now we had mentioned the skirts. So skirts now, when you're talking about length, and again, honestly, in this day and age, I'm not even going to play the violin. Not going to do it, girls, because maxi skirts are so in. They're so in that mamash, it's like hashtag no sympathy there. Between the, I want to say 3, like to the mid thigh. I'm sorry, I'm the mid calf with these like new middies. There are plenty of styles coming out with that. The maxi skirts, plenty of styles. Even well-known designers are coming out with that. So you can get, this is not hard at all. These styles are not hard at all to find. So the rule of thumb that you want to have is that whenever, no matter what, standing, sitting, the knee has to be covered. So, I believe Sephardim hold 3 inches below the knee, and the Ashkenazi hold 4 inches. Now, honestly, 4 inches, you might as well just go for the 4 inches, because it really doesn't, it doesn't seem like, you can barely tell. What I like, a trick that I used to use a lot, especially when I was having a hard time and I was just building my wardrobe, is that I would go into the tall section because I'm petite. So right away, a regular will already give me a few inches. A tall will really bring me into the safe zone, because it really would add on the inches I needed in order to make the work for me. So that's a trick that you can do to make sure that, you find the skirt, you love it, but it's almost there. And I had discussed also previously, and this was a trick that I learned from a Rebbitzin out of Muncie, is that you can take, fabric and you can extend onto that skirt, either if you are skilled in, in the ways of seamstress. I don't have that skill. Or you can take it to somebody professionally. But a lot of times, the new thing that a lot of people are going through is for custom made clothing, which is really great because you can pick the fabrics. It comes out a lot cheaper, especially if you have a great eye for fashion. This is a great way to, to kind of get into Tznius. So because we're doing Adorn with Dignity, I'm only going to briefly, and I'm going to really talk to Tichel girls at this point, because there's this new trend that's coming out where they're kind of showing the bangs and they're pushing out, sides of the hair. So let me just tell you, based on the Gemara, what has to be covered. So if there, there's a place, it's almost like right by your temple, where when if you open your jaw, you'll feel that bone separating, the part where your mouth is moving. And for me, it's very easy to find because I'm talking all the time. So that part that moves from their bottom, so those little baby hairs that come out, you're good. It's all good in the hood. You can keep going. So anything above that needs to be covered. Now on the base of the skull, right where the skull and the spine are getting ready to meet, there's kind of like this hollow. From that hollow down, again, because sometimes we have these baby hairs, not really baby hairs, but there's hairs there's like a little patch that we almost can't quite cover. That's okay. Anything that grows above that point also needs to be covered. So even this style of like wearing listen, and again, where you are is where you are. If you want to know what it says out of the Gemara, this is what it's saying. So, so a lot of times you see this style where the hair it's like down, but it's covered with a kerchief. That technically is it's not allowed, but where you are is where you are. I'm not here to give a hetzer to anyone. I'm just giving you the basics. So now, even within these clothings, okay, so we got length down, but there's also these things where sometimes, the undergarments are showing. No good. This is no good. The Ben Ishai says that even clothes that expose the undergarments is undignified, even if you're not able to make the shape out. So seeing, I'm almost like really shocked that I even have to have this conversation, because I do remember a time where you didn't even have to have this conversation. But I see this even in, law firms, the law firms I work for, where people are wearing these blouses and you can clearly see, you can make out their undergarments, their bras. I'm at a loss of words. Mark it on your calendars. I'm at a loss of words. So, you have to be very careful with all of these things. And again, if you want to get into more detail, find your local Rebbitzin and talk to her, and make sure you're picking a Rebbitzin that you really can look up to as far as, her modesty and her Tznius. You want to make sure that you're finding someone who really understands and really can empathize with what you're going through and help you to go through. I think sometimes when you hear somebody, out, even though they know they have to go on this difficult journey, I find that at times that when you hear somebody out, whether it's a rational concern or an irrational concern, that oftentimes once they've gotten it out, now they can move on. So we're going to quickly go through, touch. And, this is a very big thing. And to be quite honest with you, I myself found that I think more than covering my hair with a tichel, more than making sure all my clothes were modest, was even the concept of the handshake. Because in my profession, it's what you do. And I'm hoping to do a separate shear on practical workplace strategies to deal with, the everyday life of when people meet you and they want to shake your hand, especially in business, especially in getting a job. But we're going to talk about the issue of nida. And there's a prohibition out of Vayikra that if you're nida, you're not even to come close or to reveal nakedness. But what does that mean? And you should know that even girls, unmarried girls, even if they're not menstruating, are considered nida. So what removes nida and to move a girl from a nida status to being cleansed? So first of all, you have to have 7 clean days, which of course a lot of girls, they menstruate and then they move on. But the fact that they've not gone through the mikvah, they've not immersed in the mikvah, hence why a kala goes in prior to being married. This moves her from the status of nida over to being, to being purified. So this becomes a problem right away when we're talking about handshaking. And really, if men are on the fence for this, they're on the fence about this, especially if you're in the corporate world and you're talking to goyim who really don't know, this should be an incentive, because you don't know, one, if that woman, what if she is actively menstruating, right? Two, especially if she's a goya, she's not going through the mikvah. So this impurity is now coming on to you. So now the Ramban also, brings this down. And the Shulchan Aruch, which follows it, says that you're not to come close to forbidden women. But even if a woman is not nida, she can still fall into the category of a forbidden woman. And so forbidden women, and again, I'm going to give you a short list. And again, you want to know more, find your local Rebbetzin. I'm really going to push you to go get a Rebbetzin to teach you this. So it says, nida, an Ashes Ish, which is a married woman, a daughter-in-law, a sister-in-law, a mother-in-law, a father-in-law. And of course, your father-in-law is not a forbidden woman, but all things you have to stay away from. You have to stay away from this, which I know becomes very tricky in a lot of families and a lot of people, especially if let's say you're yourself at the Bali Tshuva. This becomes such a big, even amongst, it's a big problem for the Bali Tshuva, even if their parents, they're Jewish, they identify as being Jewish. But this is a big problem. A lot of people get very angry and upset. This is a very difficult problem. So what's permissible is that you can touch, you can touch your son, you can touch your father, your grandson, your grandfather. So now here's the tricky things, right? Because here becomes cousins, nieces, and nephews, right? And nieces. I'm sorry, cousins, nieces, nephews. Yeah, so I said it right. So now, believe it or not, I believe for the female, the female relatives, I believe 3 years old is the cutoff, and 9 years old for the male. After beyond that point, it's not okay to, which I know for a lot of people may really upset them. But I gotta tell you, as someone who suffered, this kind of bad behavior, I beg you, as one of those people who survived that, please quickly get over it. Hashem thought enough of us, and I really wish that everyone would just respect it. I really do. As someone who survived that kind of behavior, I really wish that people would just respect it and move on and stop making such a big deal about it. And there are other ways you can show your affection and your love, and they don't always have to involve a hug or a kiss, and just leave it at that. So when it comes to your brothers, it's also preferred not to touch. And adopted children, I think that's a question more for the Rebbeinu. I actually don't have an answer on that. So, so we're talking about these things. Now, behavior even within your house. So now, a lot of people, especially if you live in communities where there's a lot of Jewish people and a lot of the women come together and for whatever reason they're doing challah bakes or whatever. I know for us in Spanish culture, there are certain dishes and recipes where you kind of have to roll up your sleeves and actually put your whole hand into it and kind of grind up some of the ingredients. So now this is also an area where you have to be careful. And men should also be aware, if there's a gathering of women in your kitchen for whatever reason, and especially when they're cooking, you have to be mindful, because remember we have this whole elbow area that we talked about. But men also, that's not the time. So shush them out, unless they're a young, small child, they need something. not the time to be in a gathering of women. So in closing, I want to wrap it up, but in closing, if, first of all, these sources, they're brought down in the Gemara, they're in the Shulchan Aruch. They even have books about it, but some of these books, they seem overwhelming and scary for somebody who's starting out. So sometimes this is why it's best to find a Rabbanit to help you kind of get through this, because not only that, she'll get to know, where you're holding and how far you can be pushed. And so they know this because this is not their first time to the rodeo. You will not be the first time to the rodeo. I think at this point, I think very little will shock them. And it's good that you can bounce off these questions. In addition, on top of this modesty, you want to make sure that you have the family purity down, and that you know what the consequences are. And again, because this is such this is going out to so many people who are at different level of observances. I want to simplify this as best as I can within a time frame, and so it's very difficult to get into all the nuances and all the rules and regulations and what the consequence and what the brachot is for this. There's a lot to learn. It's just not something that you can just learn in a 30-40 minute session. You really have to take the time. And again, like the two previous shirim, these are sometimes there are things that you just have to see in practice. But I do want to do a practical strategies, shir, and I might just do it I might just put a part 4 to this, and just give the real day to day for those women who are really out in the workplace and really, they have such high anxiety about this issue, especially with the hands or that first conversation, the awkward one where you're introducing yourself, this whole hand thing. And for me, I got to tell you, it truly was even more difficult than any other aspect of Tznius, because it seems like that's almost what the minhag is in corporate life. So this is an area I have a lot of trips to the rodeo on. And so I'm hoping to give a lot of practical insights about just owning really your identity and being comfortable with it. And when you are comfortable with your identity, others in turn will fall in line and they will treat you accordingly. So we're going to wrap this one up. And if Mashiach's not come to really give us the real class on what's really, expected of us, if he's not come, I'll be happy to do it in the meantime, Besrat Hashem. But that's it for today, and I hope we'll all be together again soon, Besrat Hashem. Hi everyone, so just as a clarification on something I said in this shir, when we're talking about nieces and the issue of touch, we're not talking about aunts to nieces. So I just want to clarify that because I can already see the questions coming in. So we're really talking about uncles to nieces. And also remember, in Jewish law, it is permitted for uncles to marry their nieces and for cousins to marry. So you can start to see why these rules are put into place. But, again, very difficult, especially with people who are Bali Tshuva coming in and wanting to become a more frum lifestyle. And they find themselves having a very big difficulty, really navigating these waters. But just to clarify that point, I just want to put that in. But I hope you enjoyed this shir, and I hope we'll all be together again soon, Besrat Hashem.